So, anyways, welcome to the Grounded TV podcast, episode 5, where we're going to be
Welcome.
getting into some, I think, a topic that interests quite a few people, myself included, but it's going to be faith behind the politics, religion's hidden role in Canada. So, yeah, anyways, your conservative host, Justice.
I'm the liberal guy, Saul.
So, we're going to be talking about basically faith in religion and its effect on politics today. So check this out, guys.
About 20,000 people have gathered in St. Peter's Square, many of them lining up in long lines to wait their turn to pay their respects to Pope Francis. Now, everything began this morning with the procession that started around 9 local time, and you had people that lined up a few hours before that because they wanted the moment to see Pope Francis's simple wooden coffin carrying his body taken from the Casa Marta house, which is where Pope Francis lived and died, to the iconic St. Peter's Basilica. The coffin was put in front of the altar. There was a service involving the cardinals, and after that, the doors were open to the public. Now, there's going to be 3 days where the Pope's body will lie in state, and visitors here, pilgrims and tourists alike, will have the chance to pay their respects and to see the coffin until midnight tonight. It will be the same until tomorrow at the same time, and then on Friday, they will have until 7 o'clock. After that, there will be a short service, and then officials will be preparing, of course, for the funeral on Saturday. I had an opportunity to walk among the crowd, the long lineup of people waiting for their turn, and what kind of struck me is just the range of people here. You have devout Catholics from all over the world, but you also have people who just happen to be in Rome during this time on vacation, tour groups, student groups, and even though some of them are not Catholic, they really thought it was important for them to be here. They wanted to be part of what they saw as a pivotal historic moment. And, you know, from young people, I heard that they really respected the Pope because he was seen as more liberal, more progressive on certain social issues.
Basically, just wanted to play that clip because we all know Pope Francis passed away. I should have probably said that before we went into the clip. Kind of forgot to mention that major part of that. But anyway, so yeah, so Pope Francis passing, and everyone's just, I thought this was kind of a reminder of religion's play in our politics, given we've seen pretty much every major party leader and every major politician around the world give a statement about it, right? And we also have the new Pope having said some quotes, which we'll get into a bit throughout this. But, you know, his quotes have been seen as rather political as well, and telling people.
Is the new Pope announced already?
Or not the new Pope. I think I forget his title exactly, but he's the guy who's filling in for the Pope right now.
Oh, okay.
Find the title. Just 1 second.
I actually listened to a whole big thing about this. Apparently, there's this like ritualized thing where all of the bishops who select the Pope, they get locked inside of the building, and every day smoke comes out of the chimney, and if the smoke is black, that means they haven't picked a new Pope yet, and if the smoke is white, that means they've selected one, and they keep on voting every day until there's a consensus where over half of them, I think, vote in favor of the Pope.
Really?
Yeah.
Basically like a jury.
Yeah, sort of.
Sounds
yeah.
like, yeah. 12 angry cardinals or bishops. Yeah, well, there's also conspiracy theories going around on the internet right now that J.D. Vance had something to do with the Pope's death because he was the last.
I thought it was a joke.
To see him alive.
I saw like a bunch of memes about it.
Yeah, I thought it was a joke too.
It's him with the curly hair.
I had a friend of mine who's rather liberal, and he said that to me like it was like fact, and I was just like, what? Like, what are you talking about? And I'm like,
that's crazy.
I forget there's like all these deep, dark conspiracy theories on the left as well that I've probably never heard of. Like, I've heard all the ones on the right from, you know, that, you know, Mark Carney's a satanic reptile, you know, PDF file or whatever else you want to call them, like the worst. But I don't really hear the left ones very much. So it was interesting to hear that. I'm just like, oh,
they're there.
Okay. Like, it's just wild. But
it's a lot of the people anytime instead of the elites or whatever, they just think everything is the CIA. Everything was done by the CIA. The CIA basically did every global event that's ever happened.
Okay, so I can't find any documentation of it, so I'll just say allegedly a representative of the Vatican was political and trying to tell people to vote for Mark Carney, essentially. So, or
Oh, really?
telling people to be careful who they vote for is what he said. Something along those lines, exactly.
Oh,
So I forget
be
whose name it
careful. Vote
was.
for Canada election. I thought that was about the Americans when I read the thing that you sent me. Protect life, freedom, and vulnerable in upcoming election. Canadian bishops, Catholic News Agency.
That's what it was. That's what it was.
In a statement released ahead of the April 28th federal election, Canada's bishops are calling on Catholics to vote with a renewed spirit of hope, guided by conscience and rooted in faith, with particular concern for the right to life. Maybe this is the statement here. Yeah, statement to the Catholic faithful by the Permanent Council of the Canadian Federation of Catholic Bishops on the 2025 federal election. Do you want me to send that to you?
Yeah. Sure, send it to me. I'll throw it up on the screen. Potentially, there's a lot of like that in certain areas.
I think there's a lot of that with Catholics.
A lot of the younger generations of the Mormon Church and the Mennonite churches apparently are kind of like that as well. A lot more. They don't share the same value, like the same traditional values as much.
It's heresy to say this too. Like some people get really upset about it, but like Muslims too. I noticed a lot of the Muslims here, they're just cultural Muslims. Like they don't even go to mosque. Like they say they're Muslim.
It's like not
culturally.
Not every Muslim is an extremist, right? And I think that's something that has kind of been, for whatever reason, a hard distinction over the years. And ever since, I think it started with 9/11, honestly. Like, it started with, all of a sudden.
Yeah, I mean, before that, there was...
dude, remember like Team America, World Police, the jokes they did? He's playing a terrorist. He literally puts a towel on his head and mud on his face.
I know, yeah.
And it's
they're not actually speaking another language. They're just saying Durka Durka.
Yeah, it's like, it's a super, super bad. Like, and it was just like it wasn't even specifying what country they're from. They were just, these are terrorists. That was
Durka Durkistan.
Yeah, it was terrorists.
They called it Durka Durkistan.
Anyways, back to the serious note. Statement to the Catholic faithful by the Permanent Council of the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops on the 2025 federal election. So yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about, is like, this to me was kind of a big deal, because I'm like, the fact that they're already like reaching out for this. Well, that was the previous Pope, right? It was Pope Francis, who was known for being pretty progressive, right? And it sounds
these are just the Canadian Conference of Catholic Bishops. So it's Canadian. It's not the popes. It's just like a Canadian.
No, but they represent
Council of Bishops.
but they're still tied to the Vatican, right? They still represent the Vatican.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
They still get funding from the Vatican, partial funding. Mm-hmm. Like they are an extension of the Vatican, right? And that's why
it's the Catholic Church is very centralized.
Because I thought the guy from one of these guys is a contender for possible Pope, what I understand. Because isn't that how it works?
It is possible. But no, there's a certain selection of them.
I wasn't able to vet that, and I was trying to find that. But all I could see was, my whole point was how politics and religion are pretty intertwined, is my point, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm surprised that they're supporting a liberal candidate too, but I think that this Pope made a really big deal out of talking about people who lived in poverty and stuff, right? Like he was the first
wait 1 sec.
Latin American Pope.
1 sec. Okay, say that all again. Now that we're on the podcast for I was on the wrong scene.
Oh, I was just saying that this Pope was a lot different because he paid a lot of special attention to helping the poor and refugees. He was the first Latin American Pope. I think prior to that, all of them have been from, I think from Europe. I could be wrong on that, but yeah, he's the first Latin American Pope. He was from South America, or he's from Argentina. And like, I guess like there's pictures of him like going to Sudan and talking to the Catholic Church in Sudan and like kissing the feet of the guys who work there. And like, just very, very, he got gifted a big Lamborghini or something, some big car. And he's just sold it immediately and gave all of the proceeds to charity, right? Like he didn't wear as fancy clothing and garb as popes traditionally do. He opted, and even his casket, instead of the like elaborate caskets they usually get buried in, he's getting buried in like just a really basic wooden casket.
Yeah, and that's actually pointed out in that video I clipped there. They do talk about that casket, not in the exact clip, but throughout that full 5-minute.
It's just more humble. Is supposedly.
Yeah, I get it, but I guess it's like, I don't know, I
think it's drawing back because I've been reading the New Testament a lot lately.
I feel like Trudeau gave that kind of like altruistic virtue signaling a really bad taste to me. It's almost just like I just look at it like Trudeau sometimes, like not with the Pope per se specifically. Whenever I hear people doing stuff like oh, there are people starving in the world, so I'm going to starve with them, I'm just like, why? That sounds so stupid.
Well, I think
like,
that this guy really walked the walk, right? It wasn't just talking the talk, and I think that that's something I always held against Trudeau is he came off as someone to me who talked the talk, didn't actually care about a lot of the things he paid lip service to, right? Point of walking the walk, right? Like actually making an effort to reach out to these communities, and even I guess like with the Gaza stuff, he was calling, because there's Catholics there, and he was calling Catholics that lived in Palestine and like speaking with them on the phone every day, and just like stuff that's like he's not required to do that, but like he does apparently give a crap about these people, right?
Anyways, we'll get back on track here. So I have this next clip for you that we're going to watch. So this is basically, now we've kind of talked about the Pope and everything. I thought we'd kind of shift gears and we'll talk about how the leaders have responded to this. Okay. So we're going to start with Pierre Poilievre. So this Pierre Poilievre, from what I understand, hasn't given a formal statement on this yet. I could not find any formal condolence or isolated clip that was already on his page or that was already kind of just around the internet of him acknowledging this. He did tweet about it, but that's about all we got so far. Mark Carney gave multiple statements on it. So for whatever reason, he really focused on talking about the Pope. However, in a lot of conservative Christian communities in Canada, I think a lot of them weren't really a big fan of this Pope specifically, not to insult the dead or disrespect the dead.
I think it's largely the non-Catholic Christians
it was the progressive, right? It was like the progressivism and like the fact that he was okay with trans people. And he said, but he had like, I didn't mind his message about it, because he was just like, he kind of was just trying to appease everybody. So I took his trans comments. It's like he wouldn't condemn it, and that was bad enough for them, right?
Because something that I was that he first started off with was something about like allowing divorced people to receive communion, but he brought it up as like a proposition and never actually took the steps to enact these changes, right? And so it was the same thing with the gay stuff and like a lot of these other things. He would bring the conversation up, and what people were saying is that, yeah, he was somewhat radical and he did ruffle a lot of feathers, but I think his motivations were that he wanted to try to get the conversation going on these things to modernize the Catholic Church in a way that it's not going to go extinct, because in the West it is declining, right? Like there's still a pretty vibrant Catholic community in like the Philippines and a lot of places in Africa, but it's growing in those areas. But in the West, it's not as big, right? And these progressive policies, ironically enough, actually they are more popular in like Canada and America than they are in the other parts of the world, right? Like the people in Sudan and in Africa, they're not super LGBTQ positive out there, right? So it wasn't for that branch of the Catholic Church. It was literally to posture him for Western audiences, to kind of open up the door for people who wanted to maybe be still involved in the church, but had, apprehensions about some of the more conservative social views, right?
Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to play this clip for you.
The Honorable Pierre Poilievre. Praise the Lord. Would you stand? Hallelujah.
Pierre Poilievre was in church last Sunday, not just one, but three evangelical churches, where he was greeted as a political savior.
And I'm believing, God, that the next Prime Minister will be the one to turn things around.
Amen.
Poilievre spread the conservative gospel.
The good news is, Canada, our home, was not like this before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like it after he's gone.
The media is not invited to these events, but a speech posted online by one of the churches shows Poilievre saying the same kinds of things he says at any political rally or in Parliament.
We need to become the freest country on earth, free, where you are free to speak your mind, to raise your children with your own values on matters of gender and sexuality.
But visiting evangelical churches is a groundbreaker for a Canadian political leader.
The trick is to do that without being tarred with the brush that you are an extremist, that you're a, American-style Christian right ideologue, which I think is toxic in Canadian politics.
Even Stephen Harper, who was himself a member of an evangelical church, thought close associations with evangelicals might be a political liability.
I would say that there's some truth to that.
Andrew Enns was Harper's pollster and says Poilievre's breaking of this political taboo is significant.
It tells us that he's fairly comfortable and he's feeling fairly confident right now that he's got a message that Canadians, doesn't matter where they are, they're reacting well to.
I think that is probably a smart move for him. I think that cohort of people is traditionally going to be supporting the Conservatives. It's a good thing to do. It's going to remind a lot of people that might not be paying attention that there's an election coming up, and that if they want, that they should vote with their church. You know, it's a voting block, evangelical church goer block, I guess, right? But if you guys vote together, you can get stuff passed together, right?
So basically, like, about that clip, and this is something that I thought was a big deal too, and what in kind of what he was saying, how even Stephen Harper, how many years ago, was looking at being part of his church could be used against him politically in some ways, right? And I think that it kind of speaks volumes that, yeah, Poilievre has shattered that barrier a lot, and he has shattered a lot of barriers. And I think we're going to see a big blue turnout this election, just because it's really hard to, like I said, estimate an election when you have the kind of norms thrown off, right? And I think that Poilievre has kind of done that time and time again. He's also not the typical candidate for the Conservatives have had in a long time. Like even comparing Harper was much older when he first became prime minister. Harper was in his 50s, right? Poilievre's in his 40s. Like, Poilievre's younger than I think any Conservative leader who's been successful. Like, arguably Scheer is similar age, but Scheer I think is a bit older and
they're the same
was
age,
not successful. But Scheer wasn't successful as party leader nearly as Poilievre has been. You know what I mean? So I think it's this is kind of what I mean, right? Is I think he's has this ability to inspire. And I think going to churches is a smart move. Yeah. And I think a lot of Christians are feeling disillusioned right now. They for a long time, think about how much change has happened in the last 25 years, from when it comes to, abortion to gay rights to just everything that they've kind of been forced to tolerate in their minds. You know what I mean? Like, for most of us, like, we kind of grew up with it. To me, I kind of see a lot of those issues as like part of the past. I don't see them as part of modern conversation anymore. Like, I don't know many people my age or around your age who are like homophobic or even care, or even,
I don't really know anybody our age who's religious.
I don't even
either,
talk
though.
about the word like religious. I know some more of since I moved out here, but a lot of it's more cultural for sure.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh, hey, like, my parents go to church, I'm gonna go to church, or I'm gonna get, like, my mom will still come and drag me to church even though I'm 30. Like, like, they have that kind of family in that kind of situation, right? But I think that religion itself is something that's been around for a long time, and I think it becomes very prominent in tough times. And I think a lot of authoritarian regimes do target it because they do not like it, because it is very fighting the oppressor and how the oppressed shall win. You know what I mean?
That's how every revolution ever has happened, though, is with populism, right? There's no non-populist like fascist takeover. That's never happened before.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying that, like, in terms
I'm just saying,
like
when they use the church, they see that as an avenue for takeover. They don't see it as an opposition. They get the church on their side.
No, but they eventually do. Like, pretty much every authoritarian regime that became, one of the horrible dictatorships we refer
eventually,
to, that's something that they switched to do is, okay, now we need to get rid of religion. We don't want people gathering. Like, and it's not, religion is like the antithesis to controlling a population, is what I mean.
They allow religion. Usually it's just a very controlled form of
Christianity
religion.
of all to a degree. I feel like is like, there's extremists in all religions. I think, some are more common than others. That's a given, and that just becomes, a product of geopolitical situations and people being brought up in horrible areas of the world where they just end up, having a really warped set of values, right? Because they have a warped sense of right and wrong due to their upbringing, right? I think there is a lot of that. And then I think the problem we're seeing lately, why there's this big movement kind of happening in the country, especially with the Muslim population, is because we've taken in a lot of asylum seekers, a lot of refugees, and at the same time, these people are all coming from countries dominated by those religions and countries that are basically, like, think about the Israel-Palestine stuff, right? Like, it's like their homeland is literally at war over this kind of stuff, or how some, it might not be a religious war to Netanyahu, but I think it's a religious war to the people of, to the everyday citizens. It is a religious war, right? It's not just, that's kind of what I mean, right? Is that
Netanyahu probably views it as a religious war as well.
well,
He's
it's
pretty
possible. I'm just saying it might not
ideologically
be,
aligned
right?
there.
It might not be. I'm just saying, right? Like, I'm not gonna assume the best
Sure,
of any
yeah.
politician, okay? But in this situation, that's kind of how I see it. Is like, you're not gonna. We've taken in people
I guess
who have come, and this is a new phenomenon, is what I'm saying. Like, 100 years
My-
ago, we wouldn't be doing this.
I just wanted to say that I think that the Christian cohort, like we had somebody in the chat here say half our population is Christian, right? And that's true. Christianity is by far the biggest religion in Canada. But I would say that there's a lot of people who say that they're Christian, but don't like a lot of people having the same religion doesn't necessarily all those people have the same values, right? There's different ways to be a Christian. Even within our own family, you can see people that go to church, are Christian, have completely different views on especially political ideas like that, right? Like things like, even abortion or refugees or immigration or there other things. Abortion's the big one for religious people. Like I think that's one of the biggest.
But
Like
what
that's
I'm trying to say.
a lot of voters are single issue voters on that thing alone, and it does stem from religion because it's the idea that a life starts at the moment of conception, right? And so if you believe in that, you believe in like a literal interpretation of the Bible, that's going to inform your politics, right? You're going to be drawn towards whatever leader is going to draw the biggest.
I think there's still there's a huge there's more to it than just that, I guess is my point. Like, there's
I agree, but that's what I'm saying
very
is half the country
complaints about certain moral issues right now, and not to mention the liberals are also the perpetuators of another program that is arguably just as taboo as abortion, which is made to a degree, right? And that
made too, yeah,
is something
I was
going to
say the LGBT stuff as well.
Well, the Christian
is another one of those
I don't
wedge
even
issues
think,
on there.
Well, actually, a lot of them don't even care about that as much anymore. They're more focused on safe supply
on
drugs and
sorry, I thought you were saying
and abortion. Yeah. Those are their concerns now.
Yeah, they're all cultural issues. Yeah, but that's what I mean, right? These are all issues that even among those Christians, even like that half of the population, huge disparities in viewpoints, right? We both know Christians who are huge supporters of safe supply, and we know Christians that are extremely against it. We know Christians that are in favor of MAID or in favor of abortion, and ones that are against it, both of those things, right? Like that is not the single decider on that factor. And so when Poilievre goes to an evangelical church, it might really just be because I don't know if it's as he doesn't think it's going to scare away any of his voters, right? Most of the people who vote for him are going to have positive to neutral views on this. And I don't know if that's always been the case in Canada, right? Like the Conservative Party is somewhat informed by the politics of America, and inherently I think that our conservatives have just gotten a little bit more evangelical than they were for Harper, right? Like that old conservatives, they were more of like an a religious, not like anti-religious, but like not really super religion focused in their messaging, right? Like what you were saying, Harper wasn't openly espousing his evangelical views, right? He wasn't using that as a central point of his campaign. But with somebody like Poilievre,
I was just quoting the video we just watched, or that clip as well, right? Like that wasn't my original opinion, but anyways, we should move on to the next clip here now, which is kind of the same topic. Now we're going to go into Mark Carney's response to the Pope's passing.
I want to speak of someone who just passed and who deeply and profoundly touched the lives of billions. Pope Francis was a voice of moral clarity, spiritual courage, and boundless compassion. He was, in many respects, the world's conscience, never hesitating to challenge the powerful on behalf of the vulnerable. Above all, His Holiness understood and taught that value in the market must never eclipse the values of society. He wrote about the cry of the earth and the cry of the poor, reminding us that ecological degradation and social injustice are deeply entwined. During his papal visit to Canada in 2022, His apology on residential schools was a crucial step in moving the church forward in its journey towards meaningful reconciliation. And one parable he shared about a decade ago has consistently guided my thinking. He compared humanity to wine, rich, diverse, full of spirit, and the market to grappa, distilled, intense, and at times disconnected. And he called on us to reintegrate human values into our economic lives.
So it's funny he brought that up because he's literally talking about the part of the book I always cringe at when he's talking about it. He's like, we were sitting at dinner with the Pope and talking about grappa and fine wines. I was just like, all right, buddy, whatever. Like,
well,
you know what I mean? Like,
I feel like the point of that speech, though,
is. I don't even know what grappa is.
Grappa is what they make wine out of. So the idea behind the metaphor was that you can't reverse, turn wine back into what it comes from. And so to put values back into focus, it's as hard as it is to turn wine back into the grappa, is what he was trying to say. So he was saying it was like these things get distilled into market forces, like where we put our value. And the whole book's about how our values don't always align with the way we spend our dollars, right? Value monetarily is not always the same societally as a value is in like your morality or whatever, right? Like our society's value. You might say, oh, I care a lot about starving orphans or something, but like people aren't in vast quantities donating all their wealth to these causes that they care about, right? And he's just saying that the goal of what Pope Francis was saying is we need to figure out a way for people to be able to spend their money in ways that represent the values that they hold. You know, not to change what people's values are, but to give people a way to express those values where they aren't like it's because it's so counter to the way our society runs, right? To give your money away or to not value financial success. And I think there's a lot in there to unpack. Like, I think there's a reason he brings it up at the start of the book. It's integral to the whole message of the book, which is that, the values of our society don't always match the monetary value of something. And then so in order to align those two things, we need to figure out a way to do that, right? Like, how do we make it so that people can express their values in a free market without it being forced on them?
Well, I think this is kind of to support your point here, not to toot your horn. I rarely do this, but to give you a little bit of credit to you were saying earlier in our conversation about ESGs and how that is people voting with their money and everything like that. And I don't know, maybe I guess I am seeing a bit of a correlation there with what you're seeing there, but I don't know. I just think, to me, Mark Carney is very disconnected from the average day person, in that it kind of shows in these, and I know he's quoting somebody, but the fact is like, I don't think everybody knows what grappa is. I'll give you that, especially younger voters. Like, you know, he might be getting through to a certain demographic very well, but I think that is what we're seeing in the polls. That is what we're seeing in the rallies, in the support. He does reach his voters very well. However, when it comes to reaching those people that don't really align with this, I feel like he really falls flat on his face.
The messaging isn't condensed enough.
Anyways, we'll I got this other clip for you.
President Trump's unjustified tariffs come with threats to our sovereignty that have one goal behind them: to weaken Canada, to break us so that America can own us, to take our greatest strengths, our resources, our water, our land, our country. That will never happen.
We need a new conservative government for a change that will axe taxes, greenlight construction of homes, mines, pipelines, LNG plants, bring home our jobs so that we can reinforce our economic fortress against the Americans.
Part of the calculation for voters in this election is which candidate can best stand up to threats from the Trump administration. And from a Catholic perspective, which candidates will stand up for Catholic values. Reporter Mark Irons spent last week in Canada to bring us this election preview.
Are Catholics in Canada experiencing a crisis of faith?
People do not really express their faith openly, publicly, certainly not Catholics. which is a major challenge for the church. Why is that?
And how is it impacting the political life of the country?
I do go to church, but I have to say it doesn't really influence my politics. A lot of the traditionally contentious issues within faith communities, like things like same-sex marriage or abortion, I mean, Canadians, I think, by and large, consider those issues settled.
So I wanted to play that clip because I thought there was some pretty good input there, especially at the last moment there. That guy there, as he was talking about the typical bombastic issues that used to be a really big wedge between average day Canadians and Christian voters, and how he says most Canadians view those issues as settled, you know?
Yeah, no, he's kind of echoing what you just said too, where you think that, like, you know, you don't run into a lot of people your age who have contentions with a lot of these things, right? You're not running into a lot of like younger millennials or older Gen Z people who are like care about gay marriage or stuff like that, right? But I think that there is still, like, I'd say more than half the voter base is older than us, right? Most people
you
who
froze there for a sec, saw your camera froze again.
Oh, did I? I don't know what's going on with that.
You don't do anything. You don't do anything. Let me activate and deactivate, and and it fixed it. So let me just handle it from now on. If you have that issue, just
okay.
I'll fix. I'll just tell you to stop talking, and then I'll fix it. Sorry.
Okay.
So yeah. Sorry. Go back to what you were saying. Want to just take it from the beginning of kind of what you're saying there.
Oh, I was just saying that guy was basically echoing a lot of what you just said, which is that in modern parlance, a lot of these issues do seem kind of settled, right? Like, people aren't talking about overturning gay marriage here. Poilievre has been very, very firm, saying he's not going to touch abortion laws or a woman's right to choose. He even calls it that, right? So even though these are traditionally, you know, funnily enough, like, you know, he's going to these evangelical churches and stuff, but at the same time, he's giving positions on things that before, I don't think that a conservative could give a position like that and still run as a conservative, right? This was like a wedge issue, like a black and white thing on that side of the aisle, and now it's not. You know, it's not considered something that you have to be against. And it's interesting to see that, that he's able to go to these churches and give his support in that way, but then also on his policies and his values, he kind of has the opposite, where he can be a little bit more left leaning than he traditionally would have been, right?
Yeah, well, and it's funny. Every time I feel like someone says values, I feel like they're giving them a plug. And I see the book right there on your TV behind you.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of funny because
you can see how far into it I am too. Not very deep.
Well, it was so funny too, because I was organizing my bookshelf and I was like, you know, people see this while I'm streaming, they're just going to see like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones books and the Harry Potter, just like a random thing of. It's so funny because you see other people, they have all these like non-fiction, hand-picked strategic books, I feel like, and I just got like, this is actually
these are
what
just
I read.
actually things I was reading.
Yeah,
they're not upstairs in my room, they're down here because I was reading them here.
But anyways, so yeah, like to your point, I think this is kind of where, again, like, I just feel like there's this. It's kind of like when I hear the way he talks, he's like, we all have this responsibility to one another, right? It rings a lot of Trudeau to a degree when it comes to this idea of like, this is why we're going to make all these sacrifices. This is why we're not going to have this anymore. This is why you're going to have an electric car by this year. This is why you're not allowed to pay.
Well, it's Maoist ideology. It's the same thing that's happening in the States right now, ironically. It's like, we're going to little bit of pain now for long-term gain, right?
Yeah,
like,
well, you just admitted
messaging.
Mark Carney's messaging is similar to Maoist or Maoism.
Well, no, I'm saying that when you're talking about these things about
Saul read the quiet part out loud,
going through like a tough period to make it to a desired end goal. I don't hear a lot of that from Carney. I'm not hearing him say, we're going to take a huge GDP dive, and it's going to be really hard for a little bit, but it'll be worth it in the end. That is something I'm seeing in America
what
right
he's saying
now.
with the debt,
and it is something
we're just going to get into a bunch of debt. It's investing, not spending. Don't worry.
Yeah, well, that's what debt should be used for, right? That's how a company looks at debt. If you hear somebody, because I actually heard somebody make a really good analogy here, where if you heard somebody say, I'm $40,000 in debt, you assume that person is not doing well financially. But if you hear somebody who says, I have $40 million in debt, you'd assume that person is very successful financially, because that would imply that they have a reason to have taken out a $40 million loan. right?
Depends, yeah,
Against their company
situation.
or whatever. Yeah. You'd have to qualify for that level of a loan, right? And so when I do, because I think about this a lot too, like I think that there is this over focus on not running a deficit on things. But if you are investing in future profits for the country and future GDP growth, it kind of is worth taking out a little bit of debt, right? Like that is good debt. It's opposed to like you're not using your credit card to keep the lights on. You're using your credit card to buy new equipment for your business or something so you can get your exports out faster or whatever, right? Like stuff like that is worth it in the long run. And like, you know, I understand the argument there that it's like, yeah, like I think that having this debt under control is a number one priority. And I can understand with people who want to prioritize that. I just think that I think he's got a point. I think that there is a reason to run a deficit and in order to invest in a long-term plan, because that's not really something that's going to hugely cost the Canadian people right away. It could down the road if we don't keep that debt under control. If you let it spiral like way down, you take out huge amounts of debt that you can never realistically pay back. That's not good, right? But if there's a plan to pay that debt off, if it's invested in GDP growth, then yeah, I think it's okay. It's not like you're like just giving money out to farmers because there's not enough food in your country or something, right? Like if that would be really bad if you were going into debt for something like that.
So, well, all right. Well, I kind of get what you're saying there. I don't agree with, you know, certain things, but you know, I feel like we already know that. So, well, and most people, for those of you who may have not seen,
and I'm just trying to explain
like
so people understand.
This members only
right?
stream, everybody knows. I was just saying, like in terms of like the podcast episode, you know, that's who I'm speaking to here, guys. In terms of everybody listening to this podcast episode, yeah, like you might not know that. Traditionally speaking, I do not want to vote for Mark Carney, and that I'm not really going to align with his values. You know what I mean? Like I'm very much more of, and it's again to do with the fact that my values I think are much different from Mark Carney's, because like okay, I agree this stuff's important, but I think our list of hierarchy, like our order of hierarchy here is off. You know, we don't, in terms of what I think deserves more priority, he probably doesn't see. In terms of housing, he does, but he has a way different approach of getting there. And arguably, the approach he cites, the post-World War II Mackenzie St. Laurent approach, arguably wasn't perfect. And it was the conservative terms that followed that were able to clean it up, and their management that actually led to the boom. It's arguable. So that's
I don't know enough about it.
So like 1960s Canada was pretty well, like 1960 to 1970 kind of era which is pretty good. You know what I mean? And
boom,
like things were doing really well, right? So like the boomers, right, so to speak, their generation.
Yeah, well, it was a period of economic growth, right?
And like early Gen X too, right? Like they were born in that time, right? Gen X didn't really get to enjoy those.
Gen X, I think, had to deal with all the fallout afterwards. Yeah,
exactly.
Because there is, and you know, like this whole trope about like the weak men create hard times or whatever. And I don't think it's that simple, but I do think that there is this tendency to think that when the bounty is big, you think, oh, well, I'm going to always have this much grain, right? Like it's like the whole grasshopper. What's that one? The ant and grasshopper kind of thing.
There's this economist. I forget his name. I was listening to him on a podcast. Or economist, whatever the hell I said. Whatever.
Yeah, I know you just said it. Yeah, you said it like somebody who reads rather than listens to things.
Okay. Well, anyways, they essentially were saying, or this guy was essentially saying that there's like a economic year that we don't really see that can range from like 20 years to 30 years, and certain events can speed it up or throw it off its cycle, right? And that right now we're coming out of an economic winter and we're coming into spring. Is his ideology, but we're far from summer. So summer would be like your 1960s, your spring is like the 1950s, your winter is World War II and the few years that followed. He is citing
I've heard there's a lot of different
COVID
variations of this.
Yeah. So
there was this book called The Fourth Turning I read a long time ago. I think I actually read it because Steve Bannon was talking about it, but it was something very similar. Yeah. Like that. That's all throughout history. There's this almost the exact same thing. Yeah. Economic spring, summer, winter, or fall and winter, and that these cycles repeat themselves.
Yeah, and every economic winter, everybody's always acting like this is the end of the nation, right? The only new phenomenon I think that's happening right now is the hyperbolic nature in our politics due to social media just fast forwarding certain things, I think, in some way. Like our exchange of information is happening so fast that I think there's like our cultural growth is happening faster because of it, or society is growing faster,
even
and
the
changing
stuff
quicker because of it.
Not to derail too hard, but if you're, kind of following the stuff that's happening in the States right now, he's getting things done a lot quicker than previous like takeovers of like media and education institutions, right? Like he's been able to get these people to heal really quickly. And the news cycles are just so fast now, right? Like something really, really crazy can happen, and 3 days later we've already moved on, right? Like that whole Signal Gate thing, that would have been a career-ending catastrophe for any other administration. But 3 days later, no one's fired, no fallout, no nothing. Another thing came out about Pete Hegseth again, and he's still in the same position.
Well,
there's
the thing is that even the whole
it's like there's no acknowledgement of a wrongdoing, so they don't actually have to deal with it.
The whole Signal Gate thing, like they've disputed, right? And now apparently there's some judge that got arrested. I don't know how true that is, but
yeah, that did happen. Apparently she was being really stupid though. She was like sneaking some immigrant out a side door or something. Like so she probably was, but it.
So there's like there's quite a few liberal influencers on X. I don't even know if they're real people, right? This one Laura something. You guys probably figure out who she is. You guys are on X a lot. She was just going off saying, watch out, this is coming to Canada. Mini Trump is going to take over and open the door for American fascism. And I'm like, you're nuts. Like, you are nuts. You're not paying attention to all what's going on. Like, and this is what I kind of, when people start saying that stuff, I'm just like, you're actually nuts to me. Like, that is, if you, or you're just completely politically uneducated.
Well,
that's
the thing is
or unaware.
because, and I've been making this point over and over and over again to people who are kind of on the left talking to me, where they'll try to draw these comparisons between Poilievre and Trump. And I always have to say, like, I don't care. I get where those comparisons come from. His campaign style does mirror a little bit of the Trumpy stuff, but I have to make a distinction to where it is completely different. Like, the stuff that Trump's doing is so unprecedented, so crazy. Poilievre's never going to do this sort of thing, right? He's not going to be shipping people into another country.
Like, that's literally,
it's not even.
I'm
It would be if he was saying
Constitution. He's literally saying,
yeah, he's not saying I'm
going to
send these people. He's not saying I'm going to send these people to an El Salvadorian prison where you'll never be able to hear from them again, right? Like, that's not what he's doing. He's not saying stuff like that. I mean, arguably Trump didn't say he was going to do that either, but he kind of did.
Every rally. He never. Well, no, he said there was going to be mass deportations, and that was what everybody thought.
But deportations are not.
But this is what I was saying, right? And I said this.
To your actual country. Yeah,
I called it forever ago. When you tighten the net, you're gonna have more innocent people caught in it, right? And that's what is just a unfortunate side effect of what they're doing. You can't do it otherwise. You can't crack down without making.
Well, that's what they're
mistakes.
saying too. Is that if we gave these people due process, it would take too long. That's literally what they're saying, right? So it's like it's inconvenient for them to follow the rules, so they're not doing it. And unless people like, and we're in this situation, they're in a situation. We're getting way too sidetracked. I didn't really want to talk about this. I can't even remember how I got here. I
blame 2 cents in the chat here. He's saying some stuff.
Oh man, no!
I
it
said
was
the
something.
judge was getting arrested.
I was talking about quick.
Anyways,
yeah, but it was before that. We're talking about quick news cycles and the Signal Gate thing, right?
So I got this next clip for you guys here.
For decades, Muslim Canadians have been a reliable voting bloc for the Liberal Party, but this year that loyalty could be facing its most profound test yet. Anger over the war in Gaza has the potential to affect dozens of battleground ridings. Farah Nasser joins us now with more on this. And so, Farah, how is this war in Gaza galvanized the community in this election, and what difference could this make?
Well, first, I should point out that Muslims are not a monolith, right? Like any other community, Dwight. So people are going to vote how they vote. But the issue of Gaza and what's happening in the Middle East has galvanized Muslims even before this election or this campaign started. And there are a lot of people who feel in the Muslim community that this is either their number one or number two issue. So I spoke to a lot of Muslim Canadians, and Muslim Canadians, I should say, are more engaged than the average Canadian voter in terms of voter turnout. So in these key swing ridings, we could see a shift. There are people who originally voted for the Liberals and historically voted for the Liberals, but might go to the NDP because of their stance on Gaza.
You interviewed Mohammed Faki, well known in the GTA, a longtime Liberal supporter, now voting NDP for the first time. So what was his reasoning?
Yes, this was really surprising, Dwight, because if you've covered Mohammed Faki, the head of Paramount Fine Foods, which is this the largest chain of Middle Eastern halal restaurants in Canada, he has been such a big supporter of the Liberal Party. There are pictures with him with Justin Trudeau at his restaurants, and he's saying he's disappointed and actually hurt by how the Liberals have handled the crisis in Gaza. And his own MP, Anita Anand in Oakville, was not one to sign a Palestinian pledge like about 20 other Muslim MPs or people running to be MP. And so he was very disappointed in his candidate. And because of that, he's voting for the NDP. Have a listen to his reasoning.
Our children are watching how we're being treated here in Canada just for saying ceasefire. It doesn't matter who the leader of the Liberal. I'm telling you, I lived all my political life as a Liberal. I bleed the Liberal. You know, we are hurt by the Liberal Party.
But yeah, no.
So
yeah,
I just wanted to show
I'm surprised that.
So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that clip because I thought it was important to see how even, and this is kind of what I wanted to lead into again of Mark Carney, is him trying to have his cake and eat it too. And traditionally, this support that Trudeau has built up within the Liberal Party, these traditional supporters, like these large companies and big contributors, like that gentleman we just heard from there. Never heard his name before. I'm not going to try and say his last name or his name because it sounds like a swear word in English a little bit. Sounds like I can't pronounce it properly. But it's just funny because from what he was saying there, of like that's what they're looking for is not. I guess I don't know. To me, I guess it's because it's a geopolitically hot topic. Our officials can't really say much on it. And I'm kind of like without causing issues, right? Like, look what happened when Mark Carney's comments and Netanyahu's tweeting about it hours later. You know what I mean? Like one comment about it referring to what Israel was doing was genocide, right? And it's just,
well, he didn't
wild.
even actually, it was somebody in the crowd said it and he said something acknowledging what they were saying without disagreeing. And I guess he afterwards said he didn't hear them say genocide. He just heard them saying Gaza. But I mean, I don't know. It's just an excuse he gave. But I just because I'd say I think he would be openly calling it a genocide if he was going to give a statement that definitive on it. I don't know why he would say it randomly in a rally and then take it back afterwards, right?
Well, anyways, the whole point is this is a politically hot topic that Mark Carney seems to be falling short of. And I think he's going to be losing more support that he might have had before. And this might give Jagmeet Singh more, like his only seats, really. Or this might be Jagmeet's only group that's still willing to support him is because of this, for whatever reason.
Yeah,
right?
I think so too, yeah.
And that's their stance on it is like, oh, well, I, need to deal with, like, this is the biggest deal to me is how our leaders are approaching this issue. Like, I don't know anyone like that personally. I don't think there's that many Canadians that share it. That's why Jagmeet Singh is polling like at like 4% in some polls. Like it's ridiculously low. Like even today, some new polls have come out putting the Conservatives like 39 and Liberals at 41 or something. And I think that's kind of realistically, I think where we're at right now is a very even two-party election. You know what I mean? Is what we're seeing.
Yeah, I think so too.
LeBlanc is stealing some support, but the only people I think who have to lose support are the Liberals because of this, is what my point was. And you have LeBlanc taking their support in Quebec. You have the NDP taking their support from certain more far left community, or I guess more left leaning communities that are or would be traditionally seen as left leaning.
Well, Muslim blocks of support as well, apparently, right?
Well, that's what I'm saying, right? Is like the traditional left support is gone for Carney a little bit here, I think. And I think he's losing that.
Yeah,
support.
I think the far left, there is like, because Trudeau used to pander to those people. I don't know how successful he was with it, but he did pander to those people. And
I think his first term very successful. I think Trudeau is incredibly successful at getting the average Canadian's vote and getting those people's votes. And then I think what happened is over time, he kept pandering to sustain, but he ended up losing the center and the average regular people.
The left-leaning people, because he didn't really follow through on any of that stuff, right? He just paid lip service to
eventually,
it, which I mean, good in my opinion, but at the same time, you can't like pretend to care about that block of people and then not actually give them any of the support that they're asking for.
Exactly.
When there's already another party for them to bleed off to, right? I think that it was a good move for the Liberals to pivot away from that sort of thing and try to aim more for being what their rightful place is, which is like a center party and not a far left party that's trying to get support from the NDP.
Yeah. And this was kind of like, you know, where I wanted to go with this was just this whole episode today for the podcast was just to kind of show the correlation that still exists, I think, between politics and religion. And we have world leaders taking stances with political. It's just something I feel like you don't hear a lot about on the mainstream news as much. But when it comes, until the Pope died, it didn't really become mainstream news. And then there's like all that footage that dug up of Poilievre and other stuff, him at a church, and you know, with Jamil Giovanni, there was a bunch of pictures there from June on his Facebook, and then there was a video of him there recently, like a week ago, right, in that clip we watched earlier. So it was interesting how they do that sometimes. They're like got this B-roll footage from his Facebook of him at different churches, and then played a video footage of him at a church just to get the little bit of, because media weren't invited to the event, which I think is awesome for
That's
anything
appropriate,
that takes place in a religious setting.
Yeah,
right?
of course,
Yeah, exactly, right? It's a sacred, so to speak, right? You know, I myself, I don't really consider myself Christian. I don't consider myself really fully atheist either. I definitely think there's more to our universe than we can understand, I guess is my point. So if anyone's curious, just putting that out there. I think Saul is typically a little more atheist in that direction. I don't know, Saul, if you're
I just don't. I guess so. If you want to be super like pedantic about it, you could say agnostic, because I'm not like hardcore in one corner. I've just, I've fallen away from the idea of, I don't want to get too deep into this, but yeah, like I'm not a religious
now's the time.
person.
Now's the time.
I mean, one of these books up here is a Bible though, right? Like I do read stuff like that. Like I do care about it. I'm interested in it. I've been reading the New Testament a bunch lately. I think that there is a lot to the stuff that Pope Francis said that was very, very integral to the New Testament teachings. They were very, it's like, blessed are the poor, and the meek shall inherit the earth, and all this stuff. Like there's a lot of focus on doing
Pacifism.
away with, and doing away, turn the other cheek, and doing away with your worldly possessions to help people. And there's the parable of the lady who, or it wasn't, I don't know if that was an actual thing that was happening, but the lady who donates 1 penny to the church is giving more in the eyes of God than somebody who donates like a few $100s every week, but it's only like a small portion of what they earned, right?
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, for sure. I think it's like coppers or something they say, not pennies, but
but it's the idea is that, you should be helping the poor, and you should be caring about the needy.
It's about protecting the weak, right? And I get
exactly,
it. And I don't know if this is in the
and
New
that the weak, and that those people have integral value. Like the whole idea of a person having a value because they're a person, that is a Christian idea, right? That does come from like Judeo-Christian values. And so, caring about people, whether or not they were born in the same country as you, or, the whole story of the Good Samaritan is the same thing, right? And the Samaritan at the well, it's the very first story in John, is him meeting this lady at a well, and she says, why are you talking to me? Like the Hebrews don't usually talk to us. And he was basically doing away with those sort of things, right? Like he was saying, I have water and food for everyone who's willing to drink and eat it. And I don't know. It is more Jesus centered than I think that a lot of the church tends to gravitate towards, this more judgment focused stuff, where really it's supposed to be expressing God to the world through good deeds, right? People are supposed to see the way that you're behaving and be like, wow, why is that person so happy and giving? Why do they care so much about people? And they can say, well, Jesus loves me, and I'm expressing that love out to everybody else, right?
Yeah, and I get it. And I've always said that regardless if you are Christian or not, I think it's got very good teachings compared to most religions that do kind of take
specifically
force,
the New Testament. Yeah.
And
the New Testament's pretty cool.
Don't always preach pacifism, right? In a sense, right? And they're more of like preaching to go preach, right? Not, preaching to go preach only to those who want to listen, right? Because it's kind of what it is with Christianity. It's about setting yourself up, but not chasing people down, right? And I think that's kind of a big appeal that it's had over the years as well, is that it's, it doesn't seem like there's much to gain out of it. And like my experiences being involved in churches and stuff, it's always been very positive. Growing up, going to church, very positive. We still know people from church or connected through churches. Like, I live in where I look in the middle of nowhere, and to see anyone that I've known before I moved up here is pretty wild. And to see, hear about,
there's
I was gonna say something someone I know who it is.
I know who you're talking about.
Someone I wasn't really ever very tight with or anything, but or even friends, arguably. Just
you have that shared experience though.
We know each
going
other.
To church when you're
we know each other.
I feel like there's like a kinship between church kids and specifically the circles that we were in. I don't know how specific I want to get there, but
it's just it's more of like a common understanding, right? And we were homeschooled too, right? And that was part of it.
That's what I was getting at. Yeah, I was going to say the homeschooled Christian kids. Yeah,
as kids, just because of you are narrowed down to who you're going to be exposed to. But at the end of the day, I think that's what one of my strengths is now, of being, comfortable being on the outside or going against what everyone else is saying or thinking. It's
me too. Yeah,
I'm used to that, I guess.
You had to construct your own worldview. It wasn't given to you through everybody else around you, or role models in a school setting. It was you were building your own view of the world.
Yeah, I guess that's the way of putting it. But anyways, without further ado, I think that's all the time we got for today for this podcast episode. And I do apologize for the technical issues that I won't be able to edit out, like Saul's camera, and we're going to fix that for next episode, as well as
sorry about that.
There was a mic volume issue on my mic. Volume was lower than Saul's for the first half the episode. So thank you guys for bearing with us on that, but we'll do our best to fix it in the editing process for everybody. But just a heads up, those might still be there, and I'll put a little disclaimer on the beginning of the podcast, so just apologizing for it, because I think it's just to show people we are addressing it. We're not ignoring it. We are aware of our imperfections of quality that we love to criticize CTV and CPAC for. So we will make sure we get on it and make sure our stuff is as good as we can get it. But thanks again for those who tuned in. Thanks for watching. Thanks to those who subscribe, please share this once it's the public version, not the, I gotta stop saying it. You members only know what we're doing here, but share, subscribe, get the word out there. Grounded TV, get people watching us, listening to us. I think that's the best way we can find people. I don't want to rely just on the algorithm or what the YouTube gods say is appropriate. I'd rather just have, I think tell your friends about us. That's all I'm saying. Share us. Let people know about us.
We're gonna give it to you like it really is, not like the mainstream media. Tell them
you gotta give them a disclaimer saying we are an acquired
raw
taste.
And unfiltered.
Yeah, you gotta listen to about 2 or 3 hours before you start to like it, and then you can't live without it. That's what you gotta do. It's like a cup of black coffee. Anyways, thanks guys again, and we'll see you later.
See ya.